You're listening to Gateway to E-Commerce, a podcast by ClearSale. In this series, global e-commerce leaders discuss challenges, best practices, new tech, and secrets to success. And now your hosts, Sarah and Denise.
Hi, and welcome back to Gateway to E-Commerce. My name is Denise Pertzer, and I'm Vice President of Partnerships and Alliances at ClearSale, and your host today. We have a very special episode that highlights commentary from some of the top leaders in e-commerce about consumer attitudes and behaviors. ClearSale recently partnered with Sapio Research to bring you what is known today as the 2021 Global E-Commerce Consumer Behavior Analysis. We dive into the insights for what the e-commerce industry needs to know about how consumer attitudes and behavior are evolving, especially through the pandemic. To get access to the report, look in the description of this podcast episode and check out the show notes to get started. We've tapped into the brainpower of our partners at Oracle and Sona Payments to talk about three trends that we see evolving with mobile wallet usage, contactless payments, and the reinvention of retail as we know it. Stick around to hear about the evolution of these trends from founder and CEO Ryan O'Leary at Sona Payments, which is a payment processing solution, as well as Neil McHugh, who is Senior Principal Product Manager at Oracle, a cloud-based tech company that focuses on automated and secure cloud infrastructure and enterprise business process applications. We also have familiar voices from the ClearSale leadership team to lend additional insight on consumer behavior trends, country and industry highlights, as well as how fraudsters are adapting in today's age. Sarah, our Senior Director of ClearSale, who led this initiative, is going to help me unpack all the information about the 2021 Global E-Commerce Consumer Behavior Analysis. So let's get started. Welcome, Sarah.
Hey guys, nice to be back.
We have a lot to discuss today, but before we dive in, tell our listeners a little bit about how this research project came about, if you would.
Being in the industry for that many years, I've always seen data about lots of surveys and data that they focus on B2B surveys. So we know a lot of what is going on the merchant side, but we don't have many research done on the consumer side so merchants can understand what is happening with their consumers, what do they want, what they are doing, what are the trends. And also another aspect that we wanted to have more information about is like how different countries they compare. And when we do have some different researches that are based, they are done in each country, but it is hard to compare apples to apples. That's why we decided to come with a unique questionnaire to get information from all of these different countries, Australia, UK, United States, Canada, and Mexico, so we could get more insights about the differences between them.
So obviously a huge endeavor, and it couldn't have come about at a better time, what with all the changes going on with the pandemic and all. So what was the biggest challenge with managing a project at this level?
I think there are the natural challenges of dealing with surveys and questionnaires, which is like, once you have all the data, how you're gonna present them, what are the points of view that you wanna look, what correlations you are finding and stuff like that. And also how we will make sure that the data that we're getting from different countries, they were being standard, like that the questions are being positioned the same way. In case of Mexico, we had a different language, so we had to make sure that everything was standard so we could compare the different countries.
And I found this to be fascinating as well, even being an employee of ClearSale, because we work across so many different countries and talk to merchants and partners every single day in a global aspect. What was the biggest highlight of this project after it was launched?
There are a few. Some of the things that we found, like for example, there are some dimensions that Mexicans and Canadians they look more alike than Canadians and Americans, for instance. So it was also interesting for us to learn and to remember people that Canada and US, they are not the same country, because lots of time people they just group them together and there are differences between them. But I would say that if I have to say one highlight in terms of statistics is that 39% of the consumers say they will never place an order again with a merchant after having a transaction declined by them. which is huge. And it's really important for our industry because we know that lots of companies, they simply decline high risk transactions. And knowing that 40% of those declines, they're never going to come back to your website, it's really big. And it gives the importance for the merchants on how to deal with those high risk transactions instead of just simply decline.
Absolutely. And one of the things that stood out to me, and this is from a merchant's perspective, but taking those consumer behaviors into effect. And I think it was Neil that we talked about how we're seeing 5 to 7 years of growth in the past 4 months. And I've heard different numbers around that from different companies, but huge surges in growth right now on the e-commerce side. So keeping our finger on the pulse of what's happening is so very important.
Yes. And nobody knows what it's going to look like once we come back to the normal, right?
Absolutely. Or is this the new normal? And that was one thing that you mentioned, that it's, potentially a permanent increase. And, for many of our merchants. And I think that's something to take into consideration as well. So speaking of which, Neil, and SonaPay that we had mentioned before, we heard from these global e-commerce leaders from both Oracle and SonaPay, and we listened to their perspectives on consumer behavior. So let's take a listen first to what Neil McHugh has to say about how e-commerce businesses are reinventing themselves.
Retail in many ways has been, reinvented over the last 5 years. And in the last 6 months, there's been, multiple studies out there that said, we've seen, 6 years, 5 to 7 years worth of growth in the last 4 months in e-commerce space. So, how does that translate into meaningful points? So, we see the brick and mortar are starting to, go away with more of a focus on e-commerce. So, people are looking for personalized experiences, but to have a personalized experience, you need to give people your information, and people are very concerned about that. So when we talk about fraud and security, that ties directly, there's a direct correlation into personalization, because you need to give more information you give, the more personalized you get, but there's, still that wariness. And as far as age goes, we find millennials, Gen Z, things like that, they don't even whatever, I want to take my information, I don't care. But when you start getting older farts like me, who still think about, who grew up in the age of privacy, security is a big deal. And correlating back to age, it's very clear that you see the older the consumer, the more feedback you get, the more product reviews, the more criticisms, things like that. So, across age, there's a different perception on e-commerce, but it still all ties back to fraud and security. Similar with, we see big trends in the last 5 years. We can also talk about AI, AR, and bots. AR's had a huge impact on how people buy things, especially in COVID. If I'm going to buy a sofa, I want to see how it looks. I want to see where it's going to fit. If I'm buying a forklift, the same thing. I want to see it in my space. So, we're seeing a lot of trends around there. And with AI and bots, you're starting to see people accept them now. And I think that's a big trend over the last 5 years, because when they first started becoming relevant in the market space, it was the equivalent of getting, hi, you've reached the United Customer Help Service line, but just digital, right? People didn't want, I want a real person. But what we've seen in the last, 12 to 24 months is people are getting over that because convenience is more important. But again, that ties back into, it's critical that your fraud and your security are very up to date, because if you don't, and all of a sudden someone hacks a bot or does whatever, then that leads to a lot of consumer confidence issues. So I think there's a lot we could say around personalization, the personalization of content, AI and bots, and how fraud monitor is big. And and I work with some partners like SnapTech out of the UK. Phenomenal partner. They do AR for fashion. So you want to, I see this, but it's too expensive. So I want to see something like this, but in orange and this size. And so it helps control, returns, inventory, and things like that. But again, unless you have some clear security and fraud, then that's going to be an issue. From an Oracle perspective, our big push around that is, one platform. You want one platform that seals up a lot of holes. If you're running Oracle CX on OCI, beautiful. We update that. It's always going. But, we also need to invest in the right partners as well, because, we have a lot of ISVs who provide critical functionality. So if you think about, one of the other trends that we see in commerce over the last couple of years too is people want payment options. So, to have, okay, we use PayPal. Well, that's fine for some, but not for others. Adyen, there's regional partners. So, flexibility on how we pay for things becomes important. So how we pick our partners and who we work with around security and fraud is paramount, because it needs to be tight, needs to be secure.
Neil gives us a ton to think about there. And I think the thing that stood out most for me was the fact that, you think about the millennials and the Gen Z groups of consumers and how they're raised being able to personalize everything that they do. So then you apply that to different segments, such as, being able to take a picture of your living room and throw a paint color on the wall and throw a sofa in there and, see what it looks like with different pieces of furniture or paint samples, or, some of the luxury brands right now that are doing things like building that sort of technology into their site so you can try on a handbag with a fancy outfit that you have to see what it looks like to go out. All of those things are becoming expected. And then you couple that with the whole security piece that he brought up, and it's almost mind-blowing to think about all the different aspects that come into play, and the fact that security becomes more important now than ever. Your thoughts, Sarah?
Yes, I agree. And there's an additional challenge here that not only people, they want personalization, but they want it now, right? Like they want everything live. That's the way that the new generations that are being raised, everything they want, they just have it, like with auto cell phones and things that we always have in hand. So it's a huge challenge for the retail industry, how to keep pace with that and how to compete with huge corporations that they have all of this money to invest in all of these different platforms for testing and AI to personalize the experience.
Absolutely.
It's fun times, but also challenging.
It is. If only somebody could put us in a virtual vacation right now, I think we'd all take part in that, right?
Yeah.
But life as we know it during this pandemic has completely shifted our priorities to safety and convenience, as you mentioned. Some of the trends that have bubbled up include contactless payments and mobile wallet usage. Let's hear what Ryan O'Leary has to say about these trends.
So if we understand who our target customer is, our target customers aren't so much consumers, right? So we work with basically businesses, small business to medium business to large corporations to organizations or nonprofit, to be able to help customize and build a payment solution for them. So our predominant audience is either our partners that we're working with, like ClearSale, or those businesses or organizations that are trying to build an ecosystem to be able to accept payments. So we don't really have direct contact so much with the actual consumer that's making the move or making that transaction. It's more directly to the partner or the merchant itself. Now, that being said, we do get feedback from our partners and merchants to say where they're seeing. And I would say the biggest trend that we're talking and hearing now of where consumer behavior is moving, at least in our space, is to contactless payments, and looking for solutions to be able to move to contactless, and then being able to shift their businesses from, say, a traditional bricks and mortar to an online business, and how this is what consumers are driving merchants, and merchants are coming to us to be able to come back with those solutions.
Ryan touched on that whole contactless payments piece, which I think we're all as consumers familiar with, whether it's from the food side of things and being able to buy food online, pay for it, and go pick it up curbside, which has happened quite a bit for most people, I think, these days, even to that bridging the gap between brick and mortar and making that more of an online experience where people can maybe do a virtual tour of a product in a showroom and talk to a salesperson over line, and then use maybe a virtual terminal solution to go ahead and check out and make that happen. But there's security involved in that as well. And I know from a partnerships perspective, we've secured some partnerships in the last couple of months that have come about just out of need for this contactless payments. For instance, we work with one of the largest mattress companies in Canada. And one of their challenges was the fact that their malls were not open so that they could have their stores open, but people were still needing and wanting to buy mattresses. So they created a contactless way of making that purchase happen. They could do it over the phone. They could enter it into a text link, credit card details, and make a purchase that way. So I think the lines from my perspective as a consumer, as well as from the partnerships perspective and being in this e-commerce space, are just showing that they're being blurred. And everything from that consumer experience and all those demands that they want to have face-to-face are becoming more realistic on that contactless side, on the e-commerce side. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I agree. And I think there are two different aspects here that we have to think about. There is this data security, but also the privacy questions that we have here. Like, for instance, lots of people, they complain that we have devices listening to us all the time, that our cell phone are listening to how we speak, but at the same time, they also want to have the personalized and all of this full experience where they can transition from the brick and mortar to the online channel and that brand to knowing that you are the same person and things like that. And what is interesting is that the younger generation, they are less concerned about data privacy. So in our survey, for example, we found that 60% of, almost 60% of the people that are younger than 50 years old, they believe that fraud protection is more important than data privacy, comparing to only 40% of the people that are 50 plus. So the younger generation, they are being more open and less concerned about data privacy. But of course, at the same time that there's more technology involved and new stuff going on, we don't know exactly how to protect the data. It's a time that we never seen. So it's a fine balance here that we have to find as an industry.
It certainly is. And more to come, obviously, as things unfold. I've mentioned a couple of times that we've got some amazing partners across the industry, from payments to e-commerce platforms, technology solutions, and alliance partners. And they all help support our fraud prevention and protection solutions. If you're interested in learning more about our partner programs, you can go to our website, clear.sale, and check out the partner tab for more information, or just reach out to us directly at partners@clear.sale. And for our third and final clip, we hear once again from Ryan from Sona Payments, where he's going to share information with us on the mobile wallet specific to the Canadian market, and as well as share some information on the changes in the devices used to make such purchases.
We have been seeing a gradual adaptation of consumers adopting more, going into a mobile wallet. So you have more clients that are moving from just contactless to a card now, to being able to say, hey, why don't I take that card and now put it into my mobile wallet so I can use my phone or my watch to be able to make those payments. So we saw that, that gradually increasing, at least in the Canadian marketplace. I'm not sure about the US, but we saw prior to COVID, Visa and MasterCard increased the contactless limits from $100 for Visa on a Visa MasterCard to $250. So that's obviously created more consumer demand, for this types of technology. So I would say when COVID hit, I think we saw everything accelerate. So everything accelerated around, and where our merchants were coming to us and saying, hey, we want a truly contactless solution. Where, as an example, the clerk that you go into, that when you go to your dentist office, that clerk, we don't want them passing over that PIN pad that they're using and keying something in and passing it over to that patient. We'd like something where we could have, one device that the clerk would ring in something and one that would be customer facing, and they don't interact with the same device as all. So one of the things that we did is we worked with alongside with one of our vendors called Clover to be able to offer two devices for the same price as one, and then link those devices together so that, so in essence, you have a solution where they're not interacting with the same device.
very interesting aspects that Ryan brought to us. And one other interesting aspect that I see that I've been seeing with COVID is that COVID has been also been an excuse for many things, right? So I think not only the worry of people about the contact, it's driving this growth in contactless payment, but also it's much faster. And I think it ties with we were talking in the beginning that consumers, they want everything now, they want everything fast. And the contactless payment's much more efficient on that aspect. You don't have to wait for the chip to process and then put your PIN and stuff like that. So it's like this also help us to think about what is going to last once we are back to normal and once we can have contact again and once people are not that much worried again about contact. So I think contactless payments is one of the things that came to stay, not only because it's more convenient, but also because it's much faster. What do you think, Denise?
I totally agree. I think that contactless piece has once again blurred the lines and is not just present on e-commerce anymore. It's part of what we do in store, even though we're there. It becomes a contactless environment as well. So Ryan touched on some of the different aspects from a merchant's perspective, but I think one of the things we need to consider is that consumer perspective, because that's what a lot of what we're unpacking here from this analysis is. And I think one of the things we take for granted is just how easy it is for a mobile wallet to be used, because a person simply has to have their device in hand and not a credit card in hand. So they could be lying down on their sofa at night and see something that they want to purchase and use a mobile wallet to do so. Same as if they're out on a walk and they decide to pop into a coffee shop, they can use a mobile wallet to make a purchase if it's a mobile wallet friendly retailer. So all of those things being said, Sarah, what are some of your thoughts on that from the consumer aspect?
Yeah, for sure it has to do with the convenience. The survey that we did, it shows that less than 30% of people say that they have their credit card with them when they're placing a purchase online. And not only that, I think the fact that you can use a wallet makes it possible for you to check out as a guest in many websites nowadays. And I think after COVID, they started to buy in websites that they were not used to buy before. So not only on the big websites, and not always you wanted to create a new account and type down all of your information. And many of the websites nowadays, they are offering the option to check out as a guest, as long as you have your mobile wallet account created.
Essentially, we're creating the ability for shoppers to be lazy these days, right?
Yes.
Hey, if that's what it takes, that's okay.
True.
So 2020 and COVID have certainly changed how we shop and how we think. What stands out to you about how our clients are reinventing themselves, highlighting different industries and countries?
I think it's really interesting to see small companies that they were not able to implement fancy technologies in the past, now being able to, because the market's much more open now. So people know that there are many merchants in need of solutions. So many service providers, they emerged and decisions are also being made quickly. So this creates a whole new ecosystem of smaller companies being able to purchase services and technologies from other smaller companies, and decision processes but much more fast because we had to learn how to react fast after COVID, right? So technology, it's much more accessible for smaller merchants. Technologies like a virtual way to test furniture in your house, or a virtual way to try clothes, things like that. It's much more accessible to a wider variety of merchants nowadays.
It absolutely is. And just even looking at specific verticals, we've spent a huge amount of time and energy supporting certain verticals like jewelry segment, for instance, where they were 100% brick and mortar potentially, and they're transitioning over just out of need to that whole e-commerce environment. But obviously with that comes their number one concern of, hey, can I ship out a $15,000 ring and make sure that it's an okay order that's not going to result in a chargeback. So a lot of these things have happened on a vertical basis as well. And I think even so, like looking at some of the different verticals that we've worked with in Mexico, as an example, with the food industry and grocery stores and, the basic needs types of things. Not only are we seeing grocers and health type products going online more and more rapidly, but we're also seeing, some of the brands go direct to consumer just out of need of getting Clorox wipes, as an example, into the hands of people, not just being the brand that's wholesaling to other products, but also having a brand in of themselves on the e-commerce front. So there's been some interesting movement there for sure.
Yes, that's so true. It's a learning for the whole industry it's becoming B2C instead of being just B2B.
Absolutely. So what can merchants do to keep up with this? I mean, what are some of the things that they can do on their sites to make sure that they're providing these types of experiences that are being demanded?
I think you have to be engaged with your industry community, right? Because you have many peers that are facing the same challenges as you are. So information is key. And also you need the courage to try and react fast if you do something that doesn't work. But I think we all have to be more, we have to be willing to try more these days because things are changing, things are moving fast. There are new merchants emerging and people that they have nothing to lose. So they are going to be much more aggressive on what they're proposing and what they're testing. So you have to be careful not to stay behind.
Absolutely. A lot of the merchants we're talking to are investing in things like creating video and creating a better experience for the consumers on their site so that they can see that product in a three-dimensional way, or see it in movement, see it on, versus being able to go into a room and try it on in a store, brick and mortar store environment. One of the other things that happens, with that is that virtual showroom, as we talked about, but also just an interactive chat. And it's not just a chat with text, but the ability to actually get online with a salesperson to a consumer and talk with them in a video chat, show them different products. There's technology out there that can show you what has been added to a cart or what types of things they've looked at before they even came to you on that chat environment, which makes it a more personable and intelligent approach when that salesperson is able to connect with them and still make it very personalized. So
yes,
there are lots and lots of opportunities out there. And I think that as a merchant, the challenge is to find the ones that fit with your audience and try different things, as you say, but not be worried about pivoting and changing gears to continue to meet their needs.
Yeah, we cannot afford that way anymore. You have to take risks.
Thanks to you all for our thought leaders that were involved in this and our team members who made this analysis possible. We hope that we have piqued your interest in this analysis. You can find a link to it in the description of this podcast, in the show notes, or you can go directly to our website page for the full report in the resources section on clear.sale. If you love what you're hearing, please let us know by writing a review and sharing with other colleagues in the e-commerce community. We'd really appreciate it. And if you'd like to know more about how to prevent e-commerce fraud, visit our website. We have a ton of resources, as I've mentioned before, dedicated to this topic and all things e-commerce to help you on your journey. If you have any questions or would like to suggest a topic you'd like for us to cover, send us an email at podcast@clear.sale. You can find us on all major social media platforms and wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Until next time.
For more e-commerce insights, visit us on our website at clear.sale.